Imagine earning more money than your parents ever did, yet never affording their same house. That sounds impossible today until you examine what actually changed beneath housing prices everywhere. Most people blame greedy sellers, investors, corporations, or simply bad luck alone today. But the real story runs much deeper than any headline suggests today anywhere else. It begins decades ago, long before housing became everyone's favorite investment asset class. Back then, homes were expensive but generally remained tied closely to household incomes. A typical worker could reasonably imagine buying one eventually through patience and discipline. The dream required sacrifice, patience, budgeting, and discipline, but still felt achievable universally. Then something subtle happened that completely changed housing economics forever afterward across societies. Houses slowly stopped being viewed primarily as places where people actually lived comfortably. Increasingly, they became financial assets competing directly against stocks and bonds across markets. That shift sounds harmless until you carefully follow its long-term consequences unfolding today everywhere. Because once homes become investments, entirely different rules begin dominating housing markets everywhere. Suddenly, rising prices become celebrated achievements instead of feared economic problems by communities. Politicians notice voters prefer appreciating homes over cheaper housing opportunities for everyone involved. Banks notice larger mortgages create larger profits and expanded lending opportunities across economies. Investors notice property values often climb much faster than wages over decades consistently. Builders notice luxury developments generate stronger returns than affordable housing projects in markets. Everyone receives incentives pushing housing prices upward almost every single year without resistance. Everyone benefits from higher prices except the person buying their first home today. At first, the increases seemed manageable, gradual, and largely invisible nationwide to most. A house worth $200,000 gradually became worth $300,000, then $300,000 became $400,000, then eventually $600,000. Wages increased too, but never at remotely similar speeds over time, unfortunately. The gap widened quietly while many people barely noticed the change happening underneath. Because monthly mortgage payments seemed more important than total home prices themselves overall. And that's where another powerful force entered the housing picture unexpectedly years later. Interest rates started falling steadily across much of the developed world for decades. Lower rates made borrowing money dramatically cheaper for aspiring homebuyers across housing markets. Buyers suddenly qualified for much larger mortgages than previously thought possible before then. That sounds helpful, and initially it genuinely helped many families buy homes successfully, but cheap borrowing created a strange and powerful economic side effect instead afterward. More purchasing power suddenly chased the same number of available homes nationwide simultaneously. Sellers quickly realized buyers could now pay significantly more money than before available, so prices rose rapidly to absorb those larger mortgage approvals almost entirely everywhere. The benefit intended for buyers gradually transferred toward existing property owners instead over time. It was like extending every ladder while simultaneously raising every wall much higher. People climbed higher than before but never actually reached the rooftop anyway afterward. Then, cities became another major piece of the housing affordability puzzle entirely worldwide. Economic opportunity concentrated into fewer metropolitan areas over recent decades across many nations. High-paying jobs increasingly clustered around specific cities, regions, and economic centers worldwide. Millions moved toward those opportunities seeking better financial futures for themselves and families. Yet, housing construction rarely kept pace with growing population demand over time consistently. Zoning rules limited density across many desirable neighborhoods and urban districts nationwide repeatedly. Existing homeowners often resisted developments threatening property values, character, or neighborhood identity locally. Understandably, nobody enjoys years of construction noise directly outside their windows every day. Yet collectively, those decisions restricted housing supply exactly where demand exploded fastest later. Fewer homes available meant buyers competed much harder for every property listed publicly. Competition pushed prices upward regardless of individual household finances or affordability concerns everywhere. Scarcity became a feature of housing markets rather than an accidental outcome anymore. Then, global investors entered a market already facing significant pressure from demand growth. Real estate increasingly attracted capital from around the world seeking financial safety everywhere. Wealthy individuals, institutions, and investment funds searched for reliable assets globally during uncertainty. Homes offered stability, leverage, tax advantages, appreciation, and perceived long-term security benefits. Homes were no longer competing only against local buyers within communities anymore exclusively. They were competing against international pools of capital seeking dependable investment returns globally. That's a difficult opponent for ordinary salaries and wages to overcome consistently today, especially when investment capital grows much faster than household incomes each year repeatedly. Then came the financial crisis that changed everything once again for housing markets. After markets crashed, central banks slashed interest rates aggressively across economies worldwide immediately. The goal was preventing economic collapse and restoring financial stability as quickly as possible. Cheap money flooded through financial systems, searching for productive destinations and opportunities everywhere. Some entered businesses, stocks, bonds, and increasingly real estate markets across nations. Asset prices surged upward while wage growth remained comparatively restrained afterward for years. This created an uncomfortable reality many people still misunderstand even today, unfortunately, worldwide. Owning assets became more important than earning income from productive work alone financially. If you owned property, rising values increased your wealth almost automatically every year. If you rented property, prices moved farther beyond reach with every year passed. The latter wasn't removed entirely, but it kept moving upward continuously instead forever. Then the pandemic accelerated trends already developing beneath the economic surface dramatically worldwide. Governments injected extraordinary amounts of support into struggling economies across the world rapidly. Interest rates dropped even further as borrowing costs collapsed temporarily almost everywhere simultaneously. Remote work suddenly expanded where millions of people could choose living locations freely. Demand surged across suburbs, smaller cities, and previously overlooked regions rapidly everywhere afterward. Housing inventories shrank while eager buyers flooded available market listings simultaneously nationwide aggressively. Bidding wars became normal, often absurd and emotionally exhausting for buyers everywhere. Homes sold within days and occasionally hours after entering housing markets unexpectedly. Some buyers even waived inspections simply to remain competitive during bidding wars everywhere. Others offered tens of thousands above asking prices almost immediately after listing publicly. Rational markets started resembling auctions fueled by collective anxiety and urgency instead increasingly. Then inflation arrived, creating yet another housing complication for buyers unexpectedly everywhere. Central banks responded by raising interest rates at historically rapid speeds worldwide thereafter. Monthly mortgage payments jumped dramatically even without home prices increasing further significantly afterward. Suddenly, buyers faced elevated prices and expensive financing costs simultaneously everywhere across markets. This combination created affordability pressures unseen for many decades in housing history. Here's where the math becomes especially uncomfortable for first-time buyers today, everywhere now. A modest interest rate increase changes affordability far more than expected initially. The same house can require hundreds more monthly dollars almost immediately afterward, unexpectedly. Income must rise substantially just to maintain previous purchasing power levels unchanged. For many households, those income increases simply never arrived at all, unfortunately. Meanwhile, existing owners gained another unexpected advantage from previous years entirely unnoticed. Many locked extremely low mortgage rates during earlier economic periods successfully before. Moving now would mean replacing cheap debt with much more expensive borrowing costs. So millions stayed put rather than selling their homes and relocating elsewhere voluntarily. Fewer sellers meant fewer listings available for prospective buyers entering markets today. Limited supply helped keep prices elevated despite weaker affordability conditions overall nationwide. The market became strangely frozen rather than fully correcting downward as expected previously. Buyers waited patiently, sellers waited too. Prices drifted but rarely collapsed significantly afterward. Everyone expected relief eventually, yet relief stubbornly refused appearing quickly anywhere across markets. Popular explanations often miss this larger, interconnected economic machinery operating underneath everything today. People say houses are expensive because construction costs increased significantly everywhere recently alone. That's partly true, but not the entire explanation behind affordability problems today. Others blame corporations purchasing homes across certain neighborhoods and regions today heavily. That matters too, although effects vary significantly across different housing markets nationwide. The deeper issue involves money, incentives, scarcity, and financialization working together simultaneously. Housing became an asset class before remaining a basic human necessity everywhere today. Those two roles frequently conflict in ways rarely discussed openly enough publicly. Investors want appreciation while buyers need affordability, accessibility, and stability instead, desperately. Existing owners celebrate rising values while newcomers face growing barriers every year. The same outcome creates winners and losers simultaneously every single year thereafter. That's why housing debates often feel frustratingly impossible to solve politically today. Different groups benefit from entirely opposite versions of market success outcomes simultaneously. Cheaper housing sounds wonderful until property owners calculate personal consequences carefully themselves. Higher prices sound wonderful until younger generations attempt purchasing homes themselves too. The system contains incentives pulling participants toward conflicting objectives every year continuously. And those incentives didn't emerge accidentally, suddenly, or overnight at all historically. They developed gradually through decades of financial, political, and policy decisions collectively. Each individual choice seemed reasonable when viewed independently during its time originally. Together, they created today's affordability crisis hiding in plain sight everywhere around us. So the problem isn't simply that houses cost too much money today alone. The problem is housing transformed into something much larger than shelter alone eventually. It became savings account, investment vehicle, retirement plan, and status symbols simultaneously. When one asset carries many responsibilities, tensions inevitably begin emerging everywhere eventually. The question isn't whether housing should become affordable again someday worldwide anymore. The question is who absorbs the cost when affordability finally returns again someday.